I see what
Okay. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for
Oh,
having me,
man.
Sam.
Yeah,
It's good to
same.
be here.
Yeah, same here, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome again to another episode of the Open Discussion Podcast. Today we have a very special guest. I refer to her as my sister, because we both was classmates together from the San Major Academy. And for some reason, when I got stationed in Full Sail, when I left the academy, got to Full Sail, guess who I saw? Simon Major Kennedy. And then she left from there until went down to the Fort Drum. I guess you pissed somebody off, right? This is
No,
cool, but
who goes from Fort
yeah,
Sill to Fort Drum? Yeah.
tell me about it. And before Drum, you did your last time over here over Austin, over a Shaw, a three-star
Yes.
level village. So it is a blessing. I want to say thanks for your service. You have been a very, very inspirational person to me. Because I remember one time back in Sill, I left at the time, went up to your office trying to ask you for some nanny stuff. You were like, this guy right here, boy, you gotta be broke. But one thing I learned, right, within the military, there's two folks you don't want to piss off: the 42s and the 92s. You want to make sure, man.
Right. You want to make sure you got your people, you got something to eat.
Absolutely. But I just want to say again, I really appreciate you. Thanks for what you've been doing so far. Thanks for your service and thanks to your family. And the podcast as we discussed earlier really is really designed to bring back, retirees and active duty folks to just discuss our military experience. A lot of folks out there, they support the military and see us wearing a uniform and say thanks for your service. But I understand exactly what you do on a day-to-day basis, right? How the army has affected you, no matter if it's negative, positively, and how did you navigate the army? So, and the first question I really want to ask you here is, why did you serve? We all have different reasons for joining the army, wearing this uniform, and just serve our country. But why did you serve?
Well, Sam, I think that every soldier has a story to tell, and we all have a reason on why we chose to serve. And I'm no different than really the next soldier that just wants to better themselves. I had a very chaotic, I'd say, upbringing, right?
Right.
My mom was a single parent. Didn't know who my dad was. Thought I was grown from and moved out of my mom's house at the age of 16 because I just thought I knew everything at life at 16. Um, and so I just hopped around friends' house, and eventually I was in a relationship with an older guy who had his own place, and I was still in high school. So the one thing I didn't do was quit high school.
Yes.
And then one day he just didn't come home from work. And when I say that was that he was killed in a car accident.
Whoa.
I'm in my senior year, right? And I'm thinking we're going to get married. I'm thinking that, we'll start a family and everything like that after I graduate high school. And he was killed. And so that was just like tragic. Actually, yesterday was 31st anniversary. But
Man.
um, I moved in with his family. His family took me in. And as I tried to decide what it is I was going to do with my life now, um, he had a sister that was in the military. He had been in the military himself. And as I came closer in the grieving process and trying to decide, man, I can't stay with them forever. Like, they're treating me like a daughter, but I really got to experience life on my own. I got to leave this city. I got to start over and I'm just going to go for it. So I went to go see a recruiter when they came to the schools back then in the high school. The recruiters
Yeah.
come in on job fairs and things, and I went to them and said, "Hey, I want to sign up and join the army." And they looked at me like, "Really? You're a little prissy.
Yeah.
Oh, is this really what you want to do?" But at that time, I just committed to it. And I signed up as a 71 Lima, as an administrative specialist then, because they said, you work in a building, you have air conditioning, you won't be out there doing any logistics or anything. I was like, okay, that sounds,
Sign me up, right? That
I was
sounds
like, that
nice.
sounds like me. I was like, I wanted the money for college. I wanted the experience. I wanted to, move on from this situation that I was in. And so I joined right out of high school, graduated high school in June 1991 and joined in September 1991 and found my way to basic training at Fort Jackson, South Carolina to be a 71 Lima.
Man.
To me, it was just a great opportunity, my first opportunity that I had because I thought, basic training, just follow what the drill sergeants say. Follow what they say, and you'd be okay.
Okay.
And I did basic training at Fort Jackson, got on a bus, went down the street, a couple buildings, and did AIT at the end on the same street as a 71 Lima.
Man.
And then, so here I am integrating into the army. I'm thinking it's great, everything's wonderful. I'm like, oh, this ain't bad. This is easy. 71 Lima, clerk typist, administrative specialist. I like to type. My first duty assignment was Camp Darby, Italy.
Woo! Whoa.
As an E1, I went to Camp Darby, Italy, where, the Leaning Tower of Pisa is, and half of the base is a resort. We didn't even have a stoplight. The base is 2 miles around for your PT test. It's a campground. And I worked for the Garrison CSF as an E1. So that was my first entry into the Army.
That's amazing, though. That is amazing because really your first duty station, you on like a full grown vacation up there.
I was because that's what I thought it was. Like, wow, I was
Yeah.
like, well, this ain't hard. Where's all this, be all you can be before 9 o'clock? And,
Yeah.
now, I mean, we did do PT every single day and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And I lived in the barracks and transitioning from, civilian to military was rather easy. But I just thought, man, what a great experience here. And
Yeah.
really, I was homesick too most of the time, so I didn't take advantage of even the opportunity that I had. AT&T was $1 a minute back then in the old.
That was back in the old days. So when you say that just because the things that you experience, from high school and the loss you have experienced so far, you transitioned to the military and serving initially, did it came pretty easily for you? I mean, because you were very resilient to some extent, I can assess, right? And with that, will you say that somewhat contributed to your transition from civilian to the military pretty easily?
Well, so I did grow up being resilient, being a single parent, and then I'm the oldest of two daughters. So I grew
Man.
up having to fight my own battles and having to fight boys and stick up for myself. And so I would say I was your typical teenager with an attitude problem. So
You added to the problem. You
right.
you seem so calm and collected though. You
That's but I have to attribute that to the Army because I would tell you that by the time, I've been suspended from school for fighting. I got expelled 1 year from fighting.
no, 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 not you. Not the perfect son that I know, you know.
And it's really, when I reflect on it now, I think it was just a lot of anger that I had
Yeah.
in the environment and the lack of being able to communicate effectively. Like, if I got into an argument, it wasn't an argument. Why argue? If we're just gonna fight, let's just fight.
This is
And
get
it
it
was
on.
because that's how I grew up as an older female and having to fight boys and and girls because just silly stuff. But what the army and that experience taught me was stability.
Yeah,
It brought me calm. It brought me discipline because I
man.
didn't have that growing up. I didn't have the discipline. I didn't have the stability. And I had an income that I just came in and wanted to take advantage of the opportunity. And then I did my goal was to just do my first contract.
Yeah,
5 years I thought was a very long time. And I made a commitment to do that and then get the money to go to college. I was going to at least go to college because I didn't have that opportunity,
mm,
to go to college. No one talked about that. And so that was sort of my goal when I first joined in that. And so I spent, that first few years, in Italy, in such a great
man.
assignment. Going through the changes that mentally I think, made me more resilient. Learning how to do PT, learning how to do sergeant's time training. I did receive that in a calm environment. And so much so though, but I still had a little bit of rough side to me
Yeah,
where
yeah.
I was so homesick that, someone said, oh, you can accept collect calls on a barracks phone. Well, I was like, sure. Okay, well, my family can call me on a barracks phone because I was, still dealing with things mentally.
Man.
Lo and behold, like 6 months later, phone bill comes to the barracks.
Yeah, it counts, right?
MPI gets involved, and me and my
Ooh,
girlfriend was like, we said, yeah, we accepted collect calls. Everybody was doing it. It was like a $12,000 bill.
man.
We and her and I were the only two, I'm not gonna say fools, but the only two people that honestly confessed to it,
Yes.
and we ended up getting an Article 15.
So who ended up paying for the phone bill?
The government did.
Man, I didn't
The
even know
gov
that stuff existed because back in Embarrassment, like downstairs, back in, the guy went to basic training back in Fort City, they had a phone downstairs. So how did you know your collect call was coming in at what time or what phone? Like how did that work? That's
So then you
crazy.
had a phone in the day room. You had a phone in the day room,
Yeah, yeah,
and in the
yeah,
day
yeah.
room, people from the United States could call the phone. That
Yeah.
was an international number that they called
Yeah.
into. And so anyone would answer the phone and anyone would say, "Hey, you got collect calls from so and so for Rebecca." And then they go get me. And then talking to them. So I didn't really think of anything of
Gotcha.
really.
Yeah.
But at the time, when the phone bill came in, investigation happened, and I confessed because I mean, I felt I was always been an honest
Yeah.
person. I was made an example of, me and my girlfriend, because
Man.
not only did I work for the base CSM, but here I am now admitting
Yeah.
to the charges. Now my charges didn't equate to 10,000, but they were more than 2,000. So I told people, I said, that was a rough patch for me because
It is.
I was a brand new E4.
Yeah.
And being in that environment, I didn't have too much competition as far as trying to get like waivers or anything like
Yeah.
that. So I made rank quickly. By From E1 to E4 was 18 years. I mean 18 months, excuse
Too
me,
much.
for me with a waiver at each of those grades. And so here I'm as an E4, and I'm like, now I'm getting UCMJ, and it was a field grade, and
Man,
it
you
had to
should
be
play
by
around.
my battalion commander. So it wasn't bad. It was a suspended bus. It was a 6 month suspended bus. And they said, okay, you get a chance to recover and you have to pay back the bill. You have to pay back the entire bill. And then they gave me like 2 weeks of extra duty.
Oh, okay, man. That's amazing.
So I tell people, I mean, even I had a field grade Article 15. And so that I use that, then I
Yeah,
learned to use that as a testimony. Because even
man.
though you mess up and you make a foolish mistake, you always have the ability to recover from your mistakes.
Mistakes. That is amazing. So, how did you decide it? Right after all your experience initially, I'm going to retire from the military. I want to be because for me, right? I never once sat there and said I want to be a first sergeant. I want to be a battalion CSN. I think people along the way had a very profound impact on me, and I think the way he's doing, the way she's doing it, I like the way he or she's doing it. I do believe I have the capacity or the skill set to make it out far. I never had any plan to be a first sergeant, sergeant major, whatever the case may be. So for you experiencing that in your career early on, what like motivated you to say, "No, I'm gonna keep going," and 30 years later, you're over retire.
So after Italy, they sent me to Fort Bragg, where I really learned the army, right?
A big shift though, from being on the beach, relaxing, feet in the sand down to
To Fort Bragg,
the
North
full
Carolina,
brag. Uh,
airborne unit,
of all places.
35th Signal Brigade, airborne.
Man.
And so that was a significant transition. But I adapted and I really enjoyed the environment. And long story short, I mean, really, when it came after that first 5 years was done, and I decided now where do I want to go and what do I want to do next, I came on assignment to go to Japan. And I was like, do I take this Japan opportunity? Man, like who goes to Japan? Who gets Italy and Japan? And so they say, but you got to reenlist for 3 more years. And so I'm like, yeah, I can do it 3 more years. Sure, no problem. And then and by that time I'm now 8 years in. I'm making sergeant, because as a 71 Lima, promotion was also very hard for us at that time, just because the point systems was in the 700s. But went to Japan and had a wonderful opportunity after that. And so in Japan, then I met my husband, and really just took the train together with him, because every time I thought about getting out, I had to reenlist to go to another assignment. So then, after Japan, he was going to Fort Lewis. And in order, if I wanted to go to Fort Lewis, together as a couple, then I had to reenlist to go to Fort Lewis.
Yeah.
And so it's like, yeah, sure, we'll send you where you want to go, but you have to keep reenlisting along the way. And I enjoyed what it was that I was doing, really just as a soldier, as an NCO, and then as a female, I really started coming into myself and just like, I think I like this lifestyle. It's good. It's given me plenty of opportunities. Fort Lewis, I made staff sergeant. I tell people with 795 points.
What?
795 points, I made staff sergeant.
I mean, everything was max.
Everything was
Everything.
maxed but the promotion board points. So by this time, I'm 9 years in. And I just met, and then they give me staff sergeant. And at this point, I'm at Fort Lewis and I work for the commanding general of Fort Lewis in the CSM. I'm like, this, how cool is this? This is first corps, it's like, who gets to do this?
Yeah.
I appreciated the opportunity of it by this time I'm an executive administrative assistant. So I went to the course, Echo 3 course and did the credentials and everything I had to do to work at that level.
Yeah.
And I just always liked the challenge of being at that high level and having an impact with the CG's policies or just the administrative side of things, for an installation. That started off very young for me. But I still didn't have soldiers. And I wasn't really sure what type of leader I was. By this time, I'm now having children. Um, but then I became a sergeant first class and took over Battalion S1. I go from a 3-star to Battalion S1, working for a second lieutenant. This is very humbling.
It's a big change. That's a
The
significant
Battalion
change.
S1.
Man.
And so I'm like, okay, let's just see where this goes. Now I have soldiers,
Yeah.
right? For the first time, I'm a sergeant first class, I'm a Battalion S1, and now I have soldiers. So I always felt back then as well. Now we're talking right after 9/11 happened. It's like, okay, this is a different army. We're now at war because all up until then, I was a 71 Lima, on a garrison focused army where to me, it's like, it was about appearance. It was
Yeah.
about your credentials. It was about credibility and how you did your work. And it was your reputation, right? Because now you working at a senior level, they're going to try to pick the top of the top people that's going to be in those offices. So those little things instilled in me. But as a battalion S1 NCO and then having soldiers, now I realize, okay, soldiers are with me. And so as a Hispanic minority female, I was like, wow, I need to be the example of what right looks like.
Yeah.
Because they're looking to me to make sure that I'm doing the right thing. And that defined then, okay, I'm going to make this commitment because by now I'm at 13 years or so. And I was like, okay, I can do 7 more, too easy. And that just opened up the avenue for me. Really, I went from battalion to brigade, in a signal brigade again. I was like, what is me in signal brigades? And being that one person in a brigade that sets policies, procedures, and the NCOIC as the brigade S1, that's who everyone looks to. So I mean, I enjoyed it in helping soldiers and giving back. Like that's just my passion. And I started learning that in order to be successful, you had to be consistent, you had to be competent, you had to, have character, and you had to be able to perform at that level. And it was like, next came, another brigade S1. And then I transformed, when all the PSBs went away, I transformed the brigade S1s to become self-sufficient.
Sure.
So I did that in 2 brigade S1s and in Fort Hood where we deployed to Iraq. And then just came the opportunities in there. Still a Hispanic minority female with that attitude. I wasn't going to let you in that dominant role just walk all over me because I felt as though I had to outsmart you, right? So
Yeah.
if I knew the regulations, if I studied the regulations, I read the regulations, you had
That's
no
it.
reason to come and check me.
Yeah. So that just brought me to my next question, though, and that you just discussed in real detail, navigating the military, right? Because there are Army folks who have not served, don't understand exactly what it takes for A female, rarely, because the time you joined the military back in, the 90s up to early 2000s, whatever, the army have changed since then to some extent, right? Because for
Yes.
some reason, some folks in the military had this preconceived notion that a female cannot serve in a common armed unit, a female cannot do this job, a female cannot serve in this leadership, what I mean, as far as a position. So how was it for you, navigating the military to where you end up at? Because you had opportunity to serve in different capacity, not because, this is, Rebecca Kennedy, because I believe because of your competency, but folks don't see that. So, you navigating the armies, those high key leadership position with a lot of responsibility. Now you see you have family now because you have to consider that being a army married couple. What I mean, how were you able to balance all that, manage that at the same time navigating the military very, very successfully?
I would say the first time I started having challenges, being a senior female NCO is really when people start feeling threatened by who I
Yeah,
was,
yeah, it
right?
happens.
And so I'm a sergeant first class. Now I'm in charge of a brigade S1. That's a master sergeant position, and I'm a sergeant first class coming in, and it was Fort Hood, Texas. And who's my first sergeant, and who's the soldiers in the units and the battalions
Uh,
underneath of us. Well, we had the LURS unit, the long range surveillance unit,
yeah,
underneath of us standing up. And at that time, those people were 11 series. And so my first sergeant, 11 series, and his type of mentality and his type of attitude, and I just didn't clash. I just wasn't going to let you talk to me any type of way. I wasn't going to let you come into my office and be loud and be disruptive, because as a 42 now, this is a professional environment.
yeah,
And my offices and my soldiers would treat you in a professional way. And so that's sort of where I stood my ground from day one, is that I had to speak up for myself, because otherwise, you know, you felt that you could teach me, excuse me, you felt that you can treat me any old kind of way. I always felt you teach people how to treat you. And so
yeah,
if I told you how I was from day one, we could agree to disagree on things, but at the end of the day, let's respect each other. So that's always been my philosophy. But in actuality, as I start encountering males with this ego type mentality more and more, I was just ready to fight again.
I know deep down inside, I know
That's
deep
my
down inside that there was a couple of times you like, "Man, I just want to hit this dude in the face,"
Um, and and so then at the same time, I'm going to kill you with kindness.
Yeah,
it's like it just really came to that. You can be who you be,
yeah,
but I'm going to be respectful, because if I expect to be treated that way, then that's how I'm
yeah.
going to treat you. And ultimately, I don't think I really started having challenges until then. So after Fort Hood, I went to go be a first sergeant. I went to go be a first sergeant in Naples, Italy. And here's a 42 Alpha coming from Fort Hood, going to Naples, Italy to be a first sergeant. And I didn't know what it was. It was a NATO environment.
Yeah.
I will
Yeah.
tell you that my first day in the company, met the orderly room and everything, and said, "Hey, tomorrow we're having company formation, right? We're having PT formation," because they told me they did PT on their own.
Whoa, whoa, what's going on over
I'm
here,
like, "We're
right?
coming from Fort Hood. No, we don't do PT." So, anyways, I call out PT formation, and it's always like, who's this new female?
Yeah.
It's not who's the first sergeant,
I saw it, yeah,
who's the new female coming in.
yeah.
And so I called PT formation, and only 6 people showed up. My orderly room, and in civilian clothes, while I'm in PT uniform. So that set the standard for really the experience then I had to go through transitioning that unit, because the prior first sergeant didn't take it seriously, didn't have a relationship. And so I had to forge a relationship with the Army
Yeah.
soldiers that we had on the NATO side.
Yeah.
But the leaders there, sergeant majors, master sergeants, lieutenant colonels, everyone on the NATO side of it were pretty much senior to me, besides the soldiers. Um, and I had to take a look back at it and say, okay, where do we stand PT wise? What's the height and weight standards? What's the PT standards? What's our PT rate? And
Yeah.
go back to the basics and say,
Basic stuff.
hey, we have a 60% PT failure, and start going from there to say that I'm still going to hold you to an Army standard. There isn't Rebecca Kennedy, there isn't a first sergeant. What's the Army standard say you got to do? Height and weight, PT wise, and building a relationship with the male counterparts to trust me that, give me that chance and see how we do together as a team. I was successful. I did it for 3 years
Man.
in that. So I learned then to get them to trust me. But my biggest challenge as a female wasn't until after I graduated the academy and I went to Fort Sill and I was with you.
Oh, my F core, right? Oh man.
Fire Center of Excellence. But guess what? Okay, so I'm now, first I was like, why am I going to Fort Sill? Who did I
Yeah.
piss off? And what is my, why am I there? And what I learned was that I was only one of two females on that, sergeant majors
Yeah.
on that installation. And I was the only
Yes.
female in Fire Center of Excellence.
Yes.
Um, and so what I didn't know then was that the SMA at that time told the sergeant major's branch, hey, I want the next female graduating out the class with the credentials to go be the G1 at Fort Sill. Because,
Oh, daily.
yes, but females were coming into those combat MOSs.
Yeah.
At that time, as we transitioned out of the academy and I went to Fort Sill, and it was exciting to then see, here we are in 2016, 17
16.
timeframe, to see females now opened up in all those MOSs. And I felt as though I had to be on that receiving line then
Yeah.
to be the example of them seeing a female sergeant major in that environment. But my first meeting, the G3 sergeant major, so we used to have installation meeting with all the brigade CSMs across the installation that would meet with the FCO CSM. I walk in there, I'm the only female. The G3 sergeant major says, hey, G1, your seat's in the back of the conference room.
Whoa.
I'm like, I'm a G1 of the installation. What do you mean I sit in the back? I took my place card, I put it at the head table. I said, this sergeant major sits at the head table with you. Right? So then everybody had to adjust. The next meeting, my name tag was at the back of the conference room again. I took my name tag, put it right next to the G3 sergeant major. I said, you the G3, I'm the G1. I'm gonna sit right here next to you, sergeant major, and we're gonna move forward from there. But I had to insert myself into that environment.
That's crazy though. And what's so ironic about it is our peers does that to us. For some reason, because I understand the whole ball game. Because I went up there a couple of times and sat in for Sergeant Major Masters, who was the 75th CSA at the time, and it's I never get it really. I get it, but when I don't get it. It's just the idea here because the idea of get staff sergeant major. This I don't subscribe to that concept. Sergeant major is overall sergeant major because he or she is there for overall reason. You're trying to tell me the F code G1, what I'm saying, don't have don't have to sit in the back. I mean, that is just unacceptable. And I think you had to go through all of that to insert yourself to have a seat at the table where your name should already been at the table. I mean, it's
Exactly.
it's it's just sad. It's
But it
sad.
was just those little small nuances that if I didn't teach people how to treat me, I would have kept
Yeah.
sitting in the back of the room, right? And I was going to have a voice. And I inserted myself everywhere. I then met every brigade CSM. I introduced myself to every CSM on that installation so they could remember who Rebecca Kennedy was. Um, and then really just delve into that environment and make the best of it. And it truly one of my better assignments. Now I was only there for a short period of
Was
time
it?
because,
Yeah, because you came in, you were gone. Where did she go?
well, because I was CSL to Fort Drum. And so
Yeah.
6 months into the assignment, the CSL list had came out and I declined CSL coming out the academy because I always felt as though I could have a greater impact as a G1 and I have the ability to touch the installations in Big Army than as a battalion CSM just of that 500, 700 population in there. I felt like at the policy levels, I could impact and make change, Army
I
change.
didn't know. I didn't know that because some folks would be like, "You declined CSL. Why did you do that?" But I mean, I understand it now because, like you said, it's all about the impact that you may have on somebody else compared to being a battalion CSN. So
Well, because at the academy, that you had the option then. And
yeah,
so I searched internally long and hard. Did I want to go battalion? Did I want to be a CSM or did I want to be a sergeant major? And your greater influence level as a
yeah,
G1, as subject matter experts, technical, is as the G1. And so going to Fort Sill into a TRADOC environment really, was a stepping stone because I was also Brigade S1 instructor after first sergeant. I went to
yeah,
Fort Jackson. I did Brigade S1 instructor course and I loved teaching. I did the HR plans and operations course. And so that side of me opened it up to the training the HR side of it instead of being the leadership side. And I thought I had a calling for that. But yeah, so 6 months into Fort Sill, the CSL list comes out, and I'm like, oh man, I'm gonna go be an Italian CSM now. And what I didn't know then was that G1s were CSL.
yeah,
Because we're
yeah,
still brand new, we're learning what the SAR major,
yeah.
system is. They don't brief you this in the academy.
Nope, not at all.
Um, and so I was CSL, and they didn't tell me was I going to a battalion or was I going to a G1 until 6 months later. And so when it said 10th Mountain Division G1, I was like, wow, now who did I really?
Very, very pissed off. But I tell you what, you know why they keep sending you to full suit and full drum? Because you spend so much time in Italy having fun. They be
Ex-
okay. We need to sell someplace else.
So I
Yeah.
did. So yeah, give 30 years. I spent 5 years of that in Italy, like two assignments in Italy. My
Right.
first assignment and my first duty assignment, and then my entire 3 years as a first sergeant, right? Like, and then Japan, so it's like, okay, they're going to sprinkle in, the good
Yeah.
stuff, but as a sergeant major now, we're going to send you where we really need you.
Exactly.
But I felt honored because that meant to me that you're giving me the most difficult and challenging assignments to see will I meet it.
Yeah.
And it challenged me. It was another opportunity. I always took advantage of my opportunities. And so, one, to prove you wrong, because I'm going to be the best sergeant major that is on that installation because I've already studied, outsmart, and two steps ahead. And I've always grew up like that in my career that both physically, mentally, intellectually, I'm going to be the best that I can because I have young soldiers following behind me. And so I took that and I ran with it. And then at Fort Drum, 4 months later, I'm into the deployment. So they integrated me right. We went to Iraq, and now I am the Combined Joint Task Force CJ1 Sergeant Major for Iraq. And I'm like, okay, well, let's see what this experience brings. And it was a great opportunity. But I really say all that each time, your assignments prepared you for what was next.
Yeah.
You may not have known, and yeah, I didn't have a say so in it, but I was going to be the best person and the best sergeant major that I was going to be in that position. Because I love what I did. I love taking care of soldiers. I love customer support. I love being able to have an impact on the Army and those organizations. Um, and then at 10th Mountain, I found myself in the same situation. I was only one of two female sergeant majors again. It was me and it was Sergeant Major Greaves, and she was a Statement Brigade CSN. And
Right.
they're like, well, who's this female? So then, I'm outrunning you. I'm doing everything that I can to be included in that. And I'm managing your personnel and your strength across the installation and in the most deployable unit. Um, and so I really just enjoyed being able to one, prove you wrong, and then two, to be able to get satisfaction. But here's the kicker with Fort Drum. Those same soldiers that I was, observing then and going into the Army at Fort Sill, I now had to put in formations at Fort Drum.
Good job.
And
Yeah.
so those same
Yeah.
13 series and 14 series soldiers, I now had to go down and make sure that they were in the brigades, in infantry brigades where there were no females. And so being able to see it from inception at, Fort Sill, basic
Good job.
training, to now be at Fort Drum now and making sure that we're properly placing those females in the right positions.
Rare positions.
We had the responsibility to train the leaders on the female integrations. We had to train the battalion CSMs all the way up to the brigade CSMs and the colonels and the officers on the
Right.
female integration on there,
Integration.
on the Soldier 2020 concept.
Man,
And
that's
so,
something.
not knowing that really that's what Fort Sill was teaching me behind the scenes, and then
Yeah.
Fort Drum, then was able to implement those changes.
I tell you what, the army is pretty good when it comes to transitioning or just evolution, changing things. As far as, but I think we kind of late when it comes to the integration of a female in different MOSs in different areas. But at least we have done it. I mean, it's a learning process, and hopefully we can continue to make sure that we put competent women within the right place, not because based on the overall gender. So some you said right because for me coming up. I had family very late in my career, signed first class, so and deployed a couple of times to Iraq and folks who were married, have family, have kids, you go on patrol and you get back, they won't got the phone and call. Man, you got to grow up, man. You guys gonna be okay. I didn't understood the value of family at that time. So for you now getting in the military, you have a family with you, your spouse will stay in the military, trying to figure that out. From a married senior leader perspective with family, how does that even go? How did you navigate that, very, very effectively to where you can create that balance that can, work, balance life, professional, personal life, and all that stuff. How was that for you?
So, by the time I'm a sergeant major, my husband had to get out and retire. And what was the end point for us in this military lifestyle was, we did the separate deployments. We were
Yeah.
able to manage, having two boys 4 years apart. And, it was okay. We were doing it. We were moving at separate times and we were making it work. Well, it came to head when I was in Fort Hood. And so I had already said we deployed to Iraq. But in the unit that I was in, 14 months later, we were on a deployment to go to
Yeah.
Afghanistan. And that was just a rotation. So
Yeah.
I hadn't even been back 2 years or anything like that. So at that point, I'm on deployment to go to Afghanistan. And my husband is on assignment to go to Korea.
Wow.
And our children now are 3 and 7.
Very critical age.
And so at that point of it, it was set that I was leaving for Afghanistan in like 90 days. And so I wasn't going to get out of that. And he had the same time, he had a report date to Korea like in 4 months. So he said, we talked it over. He said, I'm going to retire. I'm going to retire in lieu of the
Yeah.
assignment. And I'm not going to let someone else take care of our kids. And so at that point, when he retired, what that did for me was take me out of the Married Armies Couple program because now he's
Yeah.
retiring out of Fort Hood.
Yeah.
So once he took me out the Married Armies Couple program, now keep in mind I'm on my second deployment with this unit at Fort Bragg. And had I deployed with them, I would have been on there 5 years.
Yeah.
And so because I had already did 3 years as a Brigade S1, did a previous deployment to Iraq, HRC came in and said, hey, do you want a first sergeant job?
Oh, okay.
And so I was like, well, I do, but I'm probably going to piss some people off if I accept it. But hey,
Yeah.
it's an opportunity. I love opportunities. And I
Yeah.
say, why not? And so they said, well, we have Naples, Italy available for you. I said, when I got to be there? They said 90 days. So that then I signed out on PCS leave when my unit signed out on took block leave for the deployment. And they went
Man.
forward without a brigade S1 NCO. So that was my husband transitioned out of Fort Hood and then joined me in Italy. So for the first 6 months, I was in Italy alone. But really, in actuality, it wasn't without his support for me standing to where I am
Yeah.
today because he took that role on then to be there and commit to the children. Um, and while I could focus more on my career, the first sergeant, the sergeant major's academy, and then I moved 5 times in 5 years,
Man.
once you become a sergeant major. And so that sort of he was the stability, he was the
Yeah.
rock, he was the continuity, taking care of the family. And I needed him in order to make sure that, I could continue on where I was going in my career and where it was going to take me. So we did it as long as we could have until you put us to make a decision, family
Yeah.
or career, and he chose family.
Yeah. That's amazing though, because sometimes folks don't really see the sacrifices made by, a military families, really, no matter if it's a male, female, children, whatever. I give those kids lots of credit, man. They are very, very resilient. The constant moving and changing schools and creating new friends and all that stuff. It's a lot. And I do believe our military family does an outstanding job when it comes to just changing transition was especially just the spouses, right? Because for us, we're in uniform, and you being a 42 or CM 42, whatever, you know exactly what you're gonna be doing when you get there to some extent. But every time you relocate, your spouse have to find a new employment, create new friends, the whole 9 yards. So I mean, it's a lot of credit need to be given to them.
And then he had to deal with the stereotype because
Yeah,
I'm a senior female
yeah,
sergeant major in a community. I'm the only one in these areas, and all the other women, all the other spouses were women.
yeah,
And so he couldn't integrate into that community, into the spouses community because he felt like an outsider. And they weren't very welcoming to him because they're like,
yeah.
yeah, I had a battalion commander call him a house husband one time.
How disrespectful, ain't it?
She was a female battalion commander.
How
And she
disrespectful.
said, I need one of those. I need a house husband.
Why would you say some stuff like that?
And she never apologized for it. And very insensitive remark into that.
Yeah,
And those that type of mentality in there is that one, you don't expect females to be in senior leaderships because you still have
yeah,
this secluded club where it's just women's spouses and not including the male spouses. And so that he was just in a club of his own, and in isolation in that. So he focused more on just making sure that the family was right, making
yeah.
sure that I was right, and that I could, I could focus in on my job.
Man, that's good stuff. So after you went down to Italy 6 times, hanging out at the beach out there. So what was the decision, right? Because we all have to transition. We all went through the process, and we all have a different story when it comes to our transition and approach, our transition effort, what was given at tab, and what we face when you enter the civilian sector. Because it's a whole new different ball game. So how was it for you to transition out of the military after 29, 28, 30 years of service?
Well, thank you for asking that. So after Fort Drum, I went to U.S. Army Central at Shaw, where I then moved here to South Carolina. And from that, that put me at a three-star ASCC level where I'm part of a larger community. But immediately after I arrived at Shaw, the nominative list comes out. And on that nominative list, guess who's on there? Hey, um, and I had a really low sequence number. And so I really thought that my time at Shaw was going to be short and that I was going to go into, the senior nominative AG Sergeant Major positions that are open to us. But it's all about timing, right? And so when the positions became open, I hadn't been at Shaw Air Force Base for a year yet, and I didn't get a waiver. And so, because I'm thinking I'm going past 30, this is going to keep
Yeah,
carrying me on because I got a low sequence number. I'm now NOM level, and it's about the impact that I'm leaving for others behind me.
yeah,
Still carrying the title Hispanic Female Minority Sergeant Major. Like, what can I leave for others to follow in my
no problem.
footsteps? And so when the positions, we had five positions paneled in 1 month, and I missed them all by 30 days. And they didn't panel them in
Whatever.
1 month or
Right.
beyond. They just did them all in that 1 month time frame. Okay, I knew I didn't get it. So I was like, okay, well, the next panel was going to be, in 6 more months. There was another position that was coming open in 6 more months. And I was told, now I'm at 29 years. No, I'm sorry, I was 28 years and a half. And I was told, hey, don't submit your retirement, at the 29-year mark, wait for this position open because we think that you're going to be a great candidate to be the adjutant general sergeant major. You meet the credentials, you're going to be a great tag,
Yeah,
and so, this is where we see you to go. And but in order for there to be a vacancy, somebody has to move.
yeah,
And so that sergeant major didn't get selected for the AG job that had came open. And so that sergeant major never moved out of that position. So when that sergeant major didn't move out the position, there was nowhere for me to move anymore. And
yeah,
so now I'm approaching 29 years and I'm told, hey, unfortunately, we're sorry, there's no more positions coming open for another 6 more months. well, you're 12 months out.
Yeah. The time.
You have to, we're sorry, but you have to submit your retirement.
Man.
And so that's sort of really where at 29 years, I said, well, I'm going to do this. No more opportunities at this
Yeah.
point. There I said, I've made the best of this career. I've taken every opportunity available to me. And, I hope to have, made a lasting impact. And at that point, when I couldn't move, I just submitted my retirement. And then I had 9 months to prepare for retirement.
Yeah.
So that sort of was a wake up call because I did no preparation to there. And 2 years out, SFL tab and all this. No, no, everything to me, my mindset was still, what can I do next at the non-level? Keep going,
Yeah.
keep going.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but what I found is that, everything happens for a reason, Sam. And so when after I dropped my retirement, I ended up having two shoulder surgeries.
Man.
Um, because I was at Fort Drum thinking, I can do pull-ups at my age.
You still got to compete, right? I got to get out there and get some.
And I had torn a rotator cuff. And then my body goes into like a complete like frozen shoulder syndrome, adhesive capsulitis. Never even heard it, didn't know how to pronounce it, where now I couldn't move my right hand much. And I started as like, you know what, Rebecca, you need to start taking care of yourself. And then 29 years, I start going to the doctor, right?
Man.
I didn't put my health first in any of those positions. And now I'm going to the doctor. I'm having shoulder surgery, this whole new PRT concept and everything. And I'm like, they're like, you'll never be able to do a push-up again. You just
Man.
won't do a push-up again properly to the Army standard. You could do it to your standard. And so that's when I said, you know what, if I can't, nothing else I can do, I'm not going to fight it. I'm just going to go ahead and transition. But the problem that I had with transition as well was that I was still in a key billet position. And so I had the P cord associated to my position. And just because I dropped my retirement didn't mean that I get to now transition out the military and prepare myself. I had to go to work every single day in the midst of COVID, and my manning strength was at 30%. So, there wasn't no telework going on. And it wasn't, no one cared if I was retiring or not.
Nah.
What's going on in the Middle East, and how do we get the soldiers deployed and redeployed? And how do we get soldiers in and out with COVID protocols?
Yeah.
Was the focus. And so that really delayed my transition into mentally preparing myself because I'm still in the fight. It wasn't until I'd say a month before I start transition leave that my replacement showed up.
Man.
And so then I had to spend 2 weeks with her, trying to get her trained into the Middle East operations and HR and everything that we did. And by the time I'm trained with her, I have a retirement ceremony 2 weeks later. I am now out processing and then on transition leave because I did make sure to take care of myself and take 120 days.
Oh, you have to. I think
I couldn't take leave in 2 years. So I was going to use all my 4 months of leave to mentally and physically prepare myself for transition. So I knew that I was going to stay here because my son, I've moved him his whole life. And the only thing he asked for was, Mom, can I graduate from the same high school?
Yeah.
So my youngest is now, by this time, he is in 9th grade and he's in Blythewood. And he was like, I'd like to graduate from the same high school. That's the least I could have done. I said, sure, son, no problems. So we stay here for him. He's in 10th grade now, and we got to figure another 2 more years. He graduates in 2024. But I owed him stability.
Yeah.
And I owed him, that time for me to be here that I took away from him for so long. So I wasn't in no rush to go to work. I was trying to reintegrate with my family. Spent that time taking care of more medical appointments and finding out, I had to have another surgery. And then I found out I was anemic. And then I found out this, all because I just didn't go to the doctors. And I had back problems and stuff that I kept just putting off. But and then mentally preparing myself through the transition because it's a process. I
Yes.
would People say it was like grief. I don't For me it wasn't like grief. But for me there was stages to it.
Yeah.
The stages to it to me were four stages of it. Of anxiousness, right? Anxious of what was next. Then I had fear. Um, then from that I felt anxiety. And at the end I found a happiness.
That's amazing, right? How it all came around, right?
I
That's
felt
amazing.
liberated.
Yeah.
I felt, that this is okay, that you don't have to be, it's okay to be scared,
Yeah.
but
It's a good
you
thing.
have to mentally prepare yourself through these phases. And so those were my phases that I had to move at my own pace because I don't think there's a roadmap to it.
Yeah.
I think you have to find it at your own pace. People are like, well, go do this or go do that and go find a job here and go do that. And that just wasn't for me because I had to decompress. I had spent over almost 3 years in this high demanding position where I didn't have that time from COVID to work from home, right? I didn't have telework in my schedule. I had to give 100% effort until I came out of position. And so I had to be able to find this path and journey for me. And I didn't start looking for a job until the 1st of October, first day of retirement, where I said, okay, get it together, Rebecca. And that's when I prepared my resume. I didn't even do
Yeah.
a resume. And it's probably, not the best way to say, hey, how do you prepare for retirement? But it was
Yeah.
my journey and it was my path. But when I from that time on, I did start begin to experience there's more than the army. You gotta let it go. It's
Yeah.
okay to, take keep your hands in your pockets. Now I still correct soldiers out of uniform, but
Yeah, but get your out your pocket, right? Man, that's amazing. We gotta have some more time, man. Bring you back here and Price and Al and Ann and just discuss really transition from a senior leader perspective, because like you said, right? Everybody have their own recommendation on how you should do it, when you should do it, what it should look like, but for most of us, I think the fear comes in place is known unknown, what's out there. You have no idea. You've been serving the military for 20 some years, 30 years. That's all you know. And what lies ahead, you have no idea. So sometimes it can be very difficult to overall navigate. And I think we got to have a whole discussion about it. With all your experience and everything you learned so far within the military and your honorable service, right, we call it, it is amazing, right, to retire 29, 28, 30 years. It is a blessing, really. For all the young soldiers out there, I don't want to emphasize just on the female soldiers because you're a leader. I'm lucky as a female, of course, you're a woman, but I'm lucky as overall leader overall. But for what you experienced and the things you went through, if you was to advise, young soldiers that are in the army today serving and potential folks that may potentially join the army, what would those advice be?
I think that really, I can only speak of mine, and what I hope that I can give to someone else is that if you're not 100% committed into leaving an impact and making an impact on it, then allow the chance for someone else who is committed
Yeah,
because we need high caliber, intelligent, non-commissioned officers in our Corps who are committed to having an impact and making that impact better for
better.
those that they leave behind. And so you don't want the type of caliber then that brings discredit
Yeah,
on who we are and then questions our character. And so, to me, your character, your integrity, your selfless service, you have to ask yourself, do you bring those qualities to the table? And be upfront and have an honest conversation because that's what is going to get you to success and to the commitment that you bring to it. If you're looking for this just for an opportunity, that's not it. It's a commitment. It's a
yeah,
commitment to better the Army, to have an impact, to leave a legacy in there, and to know that you've committed it. And to the soldiers, also as well to get there. If you don't know, you don't know. Everybody's chart is different in that capacity because you have people that want to mentor you to do the right thing, but you have to be committed to yourself, and you have to ask yourself, am I willing to accept this challenge and be an example? Because everything you do there's someone that's watching you, whether you know it or not. And so I'd say take advantage of the opportunities that are there and don't be afraid to step out on faith on those opportunities. Challenge yourself to, outside of your comfort zone. That's the only thing that's going to make you grow. If you keep saying that you're not going to do it or you're waiting for a handout, you're not going to get it. You got to go
Mhm.
get it yourself. And so you got to be willing to take those risks and to be the best version of you possible, because your character at the end of this is what's going to matter. Who was Sam? Who was
Yeah.
Rebecca?
Okay. Yeah.
And your reputation walks into a room before you do.
Man, I appreciate it, man. Thanks again. As I said, thanks again for taking time out your schedule to be here. I know I disrupt your plan to fly back to Italy. I don't want to. But really, I say, I really appreciate you, my sister. I really appreciate you. I've always admired you. I've always believed in the things you did so far. You've had a profound impact on me. I appreciate how you move. Very intelligent and a family-driven person. Just the way you conduct yourself
Thank you.
you may not know, but it is amazing. And congratulations again on the job over there at Bank of America. So again, please extend my highest greetings to the family. And thanks again for your help and for your support. But most important, thanks again for your service.
Thank you for having me, Sam. And thank you for doing this for all the other, veterans or retirees or transitioning members that really don't know what's going to come next. It's okay, but just make sure that, whatever decision that you choose, that you're mentally and physically prepared for what lies next, as well as financially as well, because that's what's going to carry you on after life. And so I'm grateful to be a part of this. And if you need me back anytime, just holler.
Oh, I will. So we got to bring you guys back on here just to discuss in depth as far as just transition, really. We can help some folks out there again. But again, man, my sister, I appreciate you. Have a blessed day and take care of yourself, please. Okay.
Thank you, Sam. Have a wonderful day.
All right. You do the same. Thank you.